Doug Appleton. I'm the visual effects director over at Perception. We're just a few blocks north of here. For those of you who don't know what we do at Perception, we are a motion graphics, visual effects design company where we focus largely on kind of blending science fiction and science reality. So we'll work on, Tony Stark tech and Black Panther technology, but then we'll also work on real world cars and phones and things like that. So check out our website, experienceperception.com. You can see everything there is to see there. But today, I want to talk to you guys about something a little different. Hopefully, hasn't been covered yet today. I want to talk about using Cinema 4D to create AR filters for Instagram and Facebook. So recently, it's been out for a little while. I think it's out of beta now. It might still be in beta. Facebook released Spark AR, which is this cool program right here. I'm not going to dig too much into Spark, but this is a piece of software that they use to author their AR camera filters. So what I want to talk about today is how I use Cinema to create this cool thing over here, this kind of futuristic sci-fi skull thing for Halloween. Scary, it's spooky, it's very Halloween, but it's very, very Perception. It seems complicated, but it's pretty simple. So let's just dive right in to Cinema. So the first thing we have to do, actually I lied, we're not in Cinema first. We are in Adobe Illustrator first. The first thing you do is get yourself a talented designer who can design these things in Illustrator. I am not that person. Unfortunately, we have these people at Perception. So just to look at it really quickly, we have our sort of demonic skull shape here. Our other skull is more of a more traditional skull, but still bringing this futuristic kind of techie feel to it. Cinema is great at working with Illustrator paths and Illustrator files. All you got to do is, I'm still kind of old school on this. I saved this out as an Illustrator 3 file. I think you can probably do a newer Illustrator, but old habits die hard, so I still do Illustrator 3. And then we bring it into Cinema. So let's just grab our first one, click OK. We've got our cool skull. I want to zero this whole thing out. Hit 0, 0, so we're centered. And then let me bring in my other one. Like, OK. You'll see this is in a different scene. We'll just bring these both into the same scene. If we go to Window, we can find our scenes. Let's do this one. So we have both of our skulls in here. If you look back at what we have, they're kind of layered, right? They're stacked on top of each other, but also they're wrapping around the head. It's not just a flat skull in front of it. And there's a few ways to do this. The very complicated way, the very difficult way is to one point at a time kind of morph it around the head, which is a totally viable option if you want to spend your time doing that. But there's a much, much easier way to do this. So let's call this one, just so we know what we're working with. We'll call this one Demon Skull, and we'll pull that one forward. And then we'll just call this Skull. Right, so we have our two here. Just to make things easier, we'll turn off our Demon Skull. If you hold Alt, you can click and do both of these. I just learned that the other day and it blew my mind. So now you guys all know that too. So we have our one skull. And we want this to wrap around something so it feels dimensional. I don't have with me the actual skull in the content browser. There's a rigged skeleton. It's not on this machine, but I do have the head of that rigged skeleton, which I've brought in. So you can open up the content browser window, content browser. In here, you can search for skeleton, and you can grab this really cool skeleton rig. It's already rigged and weighted. You can move it around. But all I need is the head. I don't need anything else. So we'll just take the head. We will copy it into this guy. So we'll paste our skull in here. You'll notice that our skull's a little smaller. So we can just group this. Alt-G will group that. And if we hit T, we can just scale it up a little bit. And what I want to do is look at my front view right here. So let's focus on our front view. And I want to line up as best I can this skull to my splines that got brought in. So let's scale you up a little bit. Move you down, kind of get the eyes to line up. The other important thing here is to know the way we're going to do this is, oh boy. The way we're going to do this is by projecting these splines onto this geometry. So if there's no geometry behind it, it gets kind of messed up. So we want the skull to be just a little bit bigger. And you'll see as we look at this, those splines are up there. And really what that's doing is, if I can just select, let's do this guy. Those splines up there are going to project onto some geometry back here somewhere. So they're really going to get wrapped around the skull here. So let's look at this. We've lined this up. It's not exact, but it doesn't really have to be exact. You'll see we have some teeth in our splines that aren't in the geometry. We'll address that. And we're not lined up down at the jaw down here. And we're not lined up kind of in this area over here. But our eyes are roughly in the same spot. Our nose is roughly in the same spot. I think we're looking good. So let's take this. We have our skull bottom. We don't need you right now. Let's just focus on the top. We just want to pull some of these points, right? So we'll grab this one. Let's turn on. First thing we want to do. So we go into our selection tool. If we hit enable, we turn on our soft selection, and that'll allow us to pull a few points over. This one probably a little big on the radius, so we could take that down, let's say by half. Just pull it over. Oh, maybe it's a little too much. Let's say 75 and pull that over. And if we hop out and look over here, we're kind of just pulling that area. We want to maybe grab some of this cheek, pull that a little bit, go over here. Let's grab this cheek, pull that a little bit. And then let's hop back into this. So this part of it is really just a lot of pushing and pulling. We don't need to be too precise with it as long as we're roughly in the right area. Let's grab this bit of his jaw, pull that down. We'll grab the corner and just want to line it up with the top of his jaw. Also this area, let's do that. Let's grab this. There we go. Pull that over. Let's pull this over as well. So you can see all of these areas on the top part of our skull have the model of the skull behind it. I'd even argue actually right now that our skull may be a little too big. So let's just scale it down a bit. Trying to be nice and tight with that. And everything is still covered. Great. So let's call top of the skull. We'll call that done for right now. Turn that off. Turn on our jaw. The jaw, as you can see, goes around here. If we turn that off real quick, you'll see our jaw piece is this lower piece right here with the teeth on it. So let's see. We got it all covered up here. We're really losing it down in this area. We can just grab our bottom. Let's pull that down. Grab these areas. Pull that down a bit. Pull that down. As you can see, I'm not being too delicate with it or too precise. I just want it all covered. Same thing with the teeth here. Let's get this part. Let's get that part to line up just a little bit nicer. Some of this stuff will pull that back. All right, I think that's good. So we have our teeth. We could go in there and we could model one tooth at a time, which would be kind of a lot, and there's not really a lot of dimension in there. So what I want to do is, instead of modeling the teeth, if we grab our edges, and you'll see I already have them selected here. But if we just grab this edge here, and we can turn off our soft selection by going into our tool there. You just double click it, it'll select the whole edge. Fortunately, this model just has the edge exactly where I want it. So I don't need to worry about selecting extra little bits. You might run into some models that don't have their geometry set up as nicely as this one, and you might need to select individual edges. But for this one, we're good. Now that we have our edge, what can we do with this? Well, if we use our search feature, if we hit Shift-C, one point I knew where all of these things lived, but since the search feature showed up, I don't know where anything lives anymore. But we want edge to spline. There we go. I know it was there. Edge to spline. And we've created this spline. If we turn this guy off and turn you on, you'll see we have a spline. And with that spline, what we can do is duplicate it. Let's go back to our front, right? Our front view. I'm using middle click to just as a shortcut to get to my 4 views instead of this guy up here. We now have this extra spline right here. So what I want to do is scale that down and move it roughly here. So our 2 edges are down here, let's take this out so you can see it. Right, we have these 2 edges. One's down here and one's up there. Our jaw kind of lines up a little weird. So let me grab some of these points. Turn on that again and just pull that down. Actually, you know what? I don't need to do that. Based on what I'm doing, that's going to project onto some of the geometry anyway. So we will ignore that for right now. But we have these two splines. I want to put these inside of a loft. And what that is going to do is give us geometry. If we put them in here, now we have this nice grill that we're going to project our teeth onto. And you'll see if we turn, let me name this guy Skull Group so I don't lose track of that. If we turn on our jaw, we now have a jaw, and we have where we're going to project our teeth onto. So let me put this inside of that guy, right? We'll turn you off. We'll turn on our top. And we'll just do the same thing with this one. We've already pushed and pulled our vertices. Let's go in here and just grab some of these edges. Oh, you'll see I already have my edge selected here, but that's just a matter of doing that. This one, when I double click, you'll see it stops there and it goes all the way down. I don't really need it to go all the way down. So we can just control click and just grab the few that we want. So let's bring up our search. We have our edge to spline, right? And then let's duplicate you. Go back to our front view. And then we will, all right, so our center point's up here because that's where the skull center point is. So when I scale this, it's going to move up there, but that's okay. So we'll move this back down here. You'll notice that the teeth are a little wide down there, so we can just scale this out. Great. I'll make another loft by clicking on that. And let's put our teeth inside of our loft. And now we've got teeth for the top part, right? It looks kind of silly, but we're not using this geometry. We're only using it as reference. So let's name this top teeth. We'll name these bottom teeth. Call you bot teeth. Put you in there, put you in there. So that is, we'll say that's one skull done, right? But we have this other one. We have another skull, I'll call you skull group. We'll turn you off. And if we look here, we'll turn that off. And now we have this demon skull. So we can probably get away with reusing our skull. We'll call you demon skull group. Turn that on and see how this lines up. Right, so lining up in some areas, not so much in others. We have these kind of horn things, these really wide cheekbones here, crazy teeth, a little, I don't know, whisker things. So let's do, what we were doing before. We will focus on the bottom first. Let me turn off the bottom teeth. So this is actually pretty close. It's just kind of right here where it's not lining up. So we can select you and just kind of pull that whole thing down a little bit. Pull you down here, pull you down there. Probably move it over. Let's move this thing over. And we'll move this stuff up. Again, not being too delicate or precious with anything we're doing, because this model is only being used as reference. All right, so we'll say that's our bottom one. Our teeth, how do our teeth look? They line up with that nicely, so we're good with the teeth. Let's look at the skull top. This one we'll have to get a little more detailed. Let's pull out this cheekbone here. We'll pull out this crazy cheekbone over here. Kind of move up some pieces. Let's grab this piece, move that up. But we still have these guys on the bottom and these kind of horn things at the top. And actually, let me just pull this stuff up so everything is being covered. So how do you want to do the horns? There you go. That's a cool looking skull thing. So how do you want to do these horns? Well, I'm going to use a cone. Our cone comes in. It's massive. Let's scale it down. Well, we'll zoom in. Let's adjust our radius. And then we're just going to move it up, move it over. Let's rotate that guy a little bit. Move back that way. Still a little bit large there, so we can scale it down. All right. Let's see. Cool. So that covers that. We actually want that. Oh, we actually want this to be inside, just to make sure that nothing gets a weird edge to it. We can also make this editable and push and pull these a little bit. So we hit C, we can make that editable. And what that allows us to do is grab the points. So we can move some of our points. Oh, my soft selection is still on. Let's turn you off. Grab some of these points up here. We'll move that. Let's do that, and we can widen those a bit. Let's select our lasso and widen this guy. Move that, and let's do one more down here. Move that. All right, that lines up well. We got this weird horn. It's got a little bulge here, but I think that's actually going to work for what we're doing. So let's duplicate that. And then we just move it off to our other side. Right? If we hold shift, it'll go in increments of 5. I believe you can change what those increments are, but it's perfect for what we need. Hold shift and rotate. There we go. And that lines up there. We have our horns. I want to pull that piece in just to make sure that we don't end up with any really weird edges anywhere. Oh, so let me I turn my soft select off. Let's turn that back on. Let's bring it down to 5. Let's try that. There we go. All right, so we're pulling that whole thing down. We could even pull that in, but now it's tucked in there. So we've got our 2 skulls, right? Let's add this back to our skull top. We have our demon skull. We have our, oops, I missed one. We have demon skull. We have skull. Let's start with the demon skull since we're there. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm forgetting these guys down here. we'll do those really quickly. Let's use a tube. And I want to just use kind of the default objects in here because I don't want to have to worry about trying to model a curve myself. And I can hit this in tube, you can slice, and we can adjust our ends, right? So just a little slice there. We can change our height, move that down, and now let's just scale the whole thing. All right, and let's rotate it into place. So move it up, kind of like that. Right, so you can see our piece right here. We can probably scale it down. Let's move that over. Let's make it a little bit wider just to make sure we hit everything. Make it a little wider, and you can tell that's going down on the whole thing, and it's too far forward. Just pull it back right into there. So now we have this piece kind of up here inside of that. And just like the other one, we will just rotate it, hold shift, we can go to -90, and then move it over. It looks like that one is not quite. So let's do that. Let's pull that back a little bit. Great. So we've got our skull pieces. So I'll also throw that into my demon skull group. So we've modeled our skulls. We've got our splines in here. Still, we don't have the splines wrapping around the face of the skull, which is the whole reason we're here. We don't want it to feel like just a plane in front of everything. So I'll turn that off. I'll look at our skull. Before we do anything, what we want to do on these, if you middle click on the group, it'll actually select everything under that group. Right click, let's do connect objects and delete. I'm not really so concerned about all of these points actually being connected to each other. I just want it to be one object for these splines for what we're going to do, which we're going to project this onto the geometry. And same thing with the skull group. I will do this to the bottom first. So it should be getting, right, we're getting the skull, we're getting the teeth. Right click, connect object and delete. So now we have one piece of geometry. We get a bunch of tags on here. We don't need any of those. You can keep them, you can delete them. And then this guy, connect objects and delete. And let me delete these tags just to clean it up. So we will call this skull top. And this one will be skull bottom. All right. Let's look at our whole skull. The other thing we want to do, sorry, I keep jumping around. Before we project this, we want to split up our top here and our bottom here. Two ways we can do that. We could duplicate this, select all the points, delete it. We could certainly go that way. The other way we can do it is just select our lasso selection, and let's go through and just quickly go through. All right, how'd we do? Oh, pretty good. And then let's find Shift-C. Again, we want to split this. And what that's going to do is now we have our top that has it selected, and we don't need that, so we can just delete that. And our jaw. So now we have our two individual pieces of geometry. So let's project this. Let's see what this does when we project this thing. So we'll select our skull top. We'll select our skull points here. I'm going to try and do this the long way. I'm going to, I believe it is mesh. And then, see, I did the long way. I already messed up on this. All right, I'm doing it the short way. We want to project. So we have this project right here. Let's select project. You'll see we have new options down here. We want to be on our front. It's going to project from, right now it says view. We want to be in our front view. So kind of if you know to UV map, think of it like that. We're projecting our UVs from the front onto the geometry. It's not quite UVs, but that's kind of the simple way of looking at just taking it from the front and putting it on the skull. So we hit project, click apply, like that. You'll see it did something, but from the front, nothing really looks different. Let's do, again, the bottom one, and we'll go to project. Actually, we're up here. It keeps our last tool. We'll click that, and that. Oh, what did I do? Let's go back to project here. Double click that. We'll get out of this view. Hold on real quick. All right. Let's try this one more time with project. There we go. Click apply. So you'll see something's different. Our splines look like they are on top of this skull. So if we get rid of this, we now have these splines that wrap around. There's a little bit of weirdness on here, and that is easily fixable if we just go into any of our views. We can start going in and clicking on our geometry, and where things look kind of weird, like anything down here, just use our lasso selection. We can grab it, we can pull it forward, we can fix it. Our jaw looks particularly messed up, but it's probably just because some geometry wasn't lined up properly. Again, I'm not so concerned about this stuff being perfect. We're just trying to get a look over here. So let me at least pull those guys back, kind of where they belong up here. Should probably grab that guy. And let's grab you and pull you back over here as well. Cool. So we have our skull, right? It's all lined up. It looks like it's wrapping around. You can imagine if someone's head was inside of there, this would wrap around really nicely to their head. So that's one skull. One skull is done. This one, we'll put you in a group. This is our skull null, because I got a rhyme. Skull null group. There we go. Let's turn you like that. Oops. All right, and then we'll turn that off. And now let's look at our demon skull. Same thing. We'll select all of these. Should probably turn the visibility on that. Select all of them, connect to objects, and delete. And then we have to separate our bottom and our top. So we'll do this the same way. Collect our points, go in, just really quickly, roughly go around. Looks like I have everything selected. Great. Let's go back to our split tool. We will delete it off of this top one because we don't need that. We only need it on the bottom one. All right, so now we have, I'll move this up, our demon skull here. We have skull top, skull bottom. Let's just look at skull top. Let's right click. Let's go into our object mode. We'll right click, connect to objects and delete. Or just project onto one thing. So there we go, that guy. Let's go back to our project. Double click, apply. You'll see something changed. We don't know what yet. Do the same thing on here. Connect objects and delete. And then we will click that and that. Go back to our project. Click apply. And now, I should probably turn the geometry on first. Let's try this one more time. Skull bottom. Where did my skull bottom pieces just go? That is a great question. I'm going to undo a whole lot. Let's try. There we go. All right. Connect objects and delete. Now we have the skull bottom pieces. Let's try it again. Project. We'll go into our front view, click apply. Now, there we go. We'll turn this off and you'll see we've got, oh, our top one didn't, oh, I undid too much. I undid too much, guys. Let's bring the top one back. Connect objects and delete. See, we're getting a lot of practice doing this. Project. Apply. Sorry, I'm going quickly on this one now since it's the 10th time that we've done it. And that skull's now wrapped around. And you'll start to see like these side pieces have that nice curve, the geometry, right? That nice curve. Our horns got a bit of a curve, a bit of a bulge to them. And then if we put our, let's go with our skull group, you can start to see how we get a little closer to what we had inside of our AR application where we have these two things on top of each other. But we still need to get it to work in a way where Spark AR can actually read this information. As far as I know right now, can't bring in splines, unfortunately, but there's a really simple solution to that. We can just sweep this and give it actual geometry. So let's make a sweep. We'll start with our demon skull here. We'll put that in there. And then let's throw in a circle into our sweep. And I think, did I kill it? I may have killed it. There we go. Looks great. But let's bring this way down. I'm so excited right now. All right, first off, we're going to set this to none. We don't need that many intermediate points on there. It can just be a three-sided shape because we don't want a lot of geometry. All right, let's try this again. Just going to go. All right, now it's starting to make a little more sense. There we go. Bring it down to 0.2. Depending on the scale of your scene, these values might change. My scene is pretty small, so I got to get pretty small with this. But you can see how now we've got this thing. We got a sweep around here. We have geometry. If you look at it, the geometry is kind of wonky. Not a lot of detail in there. We don't have these rounded edges, but that's because we don't need that. Because when we look at this in AR, we're looking at it from this far away, and we can get away with a lot. So I will spare you me going through and doing this to 10 more things. Instead, I will just, do the cooking show. We put it in the oven, and then we take it out of the oven. And now we've got this beautiful thing. Yay. So you can see what it looks like once we've sweeped everything. This one, we have a few more little extra bits and pieces that I threw on there. I have these top ones that I did really quickly. You see I have my skull in here. Here's my other skull. This one I called it the Pentagram Skull. I had this geometry in there. But we have this really cool shape. The other thing we're doing is we split this into top, into bottom. We need to get this into Spark AR. The cool thing about Spark AR is it accepts FBXs. If we had animation, it would accept animation. It doesn't accept point level animation, but it'll do rigged objects and weighted objects, which is gives us a lot of things that we can do with cinema. But the way we want to get this in here, we don't need to flatten this stuff. We don't need to do anything to any of these generators. We just do File, Export, FBX, do Selection only. We want to do one at a time. If we export it all as one big chunk, it'll come into Spark AR as one FBX, and we have less control over it. You can still get to everything, but it's a lot more difficult. It's just kind of all buried in a thing. So we don't need cameras, splines, instances, lights, tracks, don't need any of that stuff. Click OK. We'll export it out. We'll call it Skull version 01. And then we open up Spark. I'm going to start a new scene just so you can see how easy it is. You get a lovely array of default people to put your stuff on, which is great. So, pick your person. So the way this program works, and I don't want to get too deep into this. I really want to focus on Maxon and doing cool things in cinema to get into this, but just to show you how easily this stuff works, we can pull in, let's say, Skull 01 jaw. We'll do top. We'll do 2. And we'll do 2 top. So everything is in here, right? All of our things. But we don't have anything in our scene. And you'll see, even if I were to take all of these, right, and just drag them into the scene, they don't look like anything. It's just a thing sitting there in the middle of the scene, not doing much of anything. If we go to Add Object in Spark on our scene, there's a face tracker. Click Insert. And then, just so we can visualize, we don't need to do this, but so we can visualize where we're placing this, they have a face mesh object. You click that, put it in there. You'll see we've got this face mesh. And in here, can't really tell what it's doing, but when we look at it up on here, and I can just turn off these guys, you'll see we have this mesh. It's tracking to this guy's face pretty seamlessly in real time. You'll also notice the other cool thing about this is when you change the person, the shape of the face changes as well. So if you're doing any effects that are based on someone's face and using this mesh, it will change with the person. So let's go back to our guy here. I want to turn on our skulls. All we have to do is throw it into our face tracker. And now it's tracking to his face in real time. You'll see they look a little big. They're not quite on the face there. So we can pause this thing and just pull it back, put it on the face, click OK, click Go, and now we're tracking to his face. Materials are really simple. You just, change your colors on your materials. You have a lot of options with materials. Again, I don't want to get too far into, everything that this thing's doing. Let me just do quickly materials. And then there you go. So we got our thing in here. If I go into, let me just close that, just so you can see kind of how crazy this thing can get. In cinema, I split this up a lot more than I was doing in here because I knew I wanted to have a lot more control over this. So when the mouth opens, you'll notice that the top 2 layers split apart, revealing the bottom layer. The eyes light up. All of these objects, all these materials were built in cinema and then brought into here. The other cool thing, if you go into View, Show Hide Patch Editor. Again, I'm not going to get too much into this. They have this really detailed patch editor where it's looking at some of these, the mouth opening, some of it's the eyes opening. It's looking for these features moving, and then you can control your objects from cinema with all of this stuff. I don't want to get into too much because we're not at the Spark AR booth, but it's really, really cool stuff. This thing right now, if you guys happen to follow us on Instagram, this is live on Instagram right now. You can follow us and play around with this yourself. Open your eyes, move your mouth, open your jaw, and it's a really cool, fun thing. I want to really briefly just talk about some of the other cool things from cinema that come into Spark. I mentioned briefly you can get rigged things and animation to come through. And open. There we go. Googly eyes. So these eyes they're built, they're rigged, animated in cinema. So you do all this fun stuff and then brought into Spark so you can quickly create these cool AR filters. And so you're not just limited to rigged animated things into static objects. There's other things we were doing. Let's see, I think I have another one in here. Let's do a HUD, something that's closer to what we are known for at Perception, making HUDs. This HUD, again, you can see built, animated, rigged. It's all using cloners, using a lot of the really cool tools, the MoGraph tools, the generative tools that are in cinema, and that's getting exported out as an FBX. Keyframes are being baked and then brought into Spark, and you can quickly throw this onto your head and have a cool HUD in Spark, all built entirely in Cinema. So that's it for what I had for you guys. Hopefully that was interesting and not too long and drawn out. If there's any questions, I will take questions or comments, thoughts, concerns, anything. All right. Thanks, guys.